On 5 News, Keith Vaz quits after prostitute allegations. He stood down as head of an influential committee of MPs, saying he had to consider the effect on his family. Also, hate preacher Anjem Choudary is jailed. He's given a 5.5-year sentence for drumming up support for so-called Islamic State. Sports Direct promise no more 0-hours contracts for staff, but will all its workers benefit? Flights cancelled, security breach. So how did protesters get onto this airport runway? And enjoying their packed lunch, but why aren't some children getting a healthy meal? Hello and welcome to 5 News. I'm Sian Williams. Those who hold others to account must themselves be accountable. The words of MP Keith Vaz today as he resigned as head of an influential House of Commons committee. Mr Vaz has been under pressure since allegations emerged at the weekend that he paid for male prostitutes. But he said the decision to step down as chairman was his alone after considering the effects of recent events on his family. Our political editor, Andy Bell, reports.
By the time he left home, he knew it was over. Keith Vaz would have to give up being the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, one of the biggest jobs for an MP outside government. Keith Vaz did not appear before cameras today, but in a written statement he said, "It is in the best interest of the Home Affairs Select Committee that its important work can be conducted without any distractions whatsoever. I am genuinely sorry that recent events make it impossible for this to happen if I remain chair. This is my decision and mine alone, and my first consideration has been the effect of recent events on my family." Allegations originally in the Sunday Mirror newspaper forced out the married father of 2. Allegations that he'd paid for male prostitutes and that he'd offered to pay for drugs. The pressure grew and proved irresistible. After he had spoken to the Home Affairs Committee today, the acting chair described the scene.
He was genuinely sad about what has happened. He apologised to the committee for the trouble this has caused, and he obviously acknowledges that, and these are private matters now he will have to deal with. But absolutely what was paramount to him, characteristically, is the reputation and the work of the committee going forward.
Nobody is questioning our integrity. It's your judgment we're questioning.
This was Keith Vaz at the height of his powers, here questioning Theresa May. He was first elected in 1987, the first Asian MP to win a seat in modern times. His government career was brief, but he became an influential figure in the party and rubbed shoulders with the great and the good. He's faced scandal before. He was suspended from the Commons for breaching the rules, and he had to pay back nearly £20,000 for wrongly claimed expenses. He survived those, but not this. One commentator from the newspaper group that first broke the story says it comes down to judgment.
You find even Labour MPs, even people on his own side, they're not supporting him because they know what he did cannot be defended in public when he sits there in a very influential position, passing judgment on others.
He was the great survivor, shrugging off criticism and scandal. That is now over, and it's not clear just where this once powerful MP goes from here.
So, Andy, what might happen to Keith Vaz now?
Well, I saw Keith Vaz today in Parliament, and I have to say he was, as he always has been, polite, calm, apparently in control, despite everything that he'd gone through in the last 48 hours. But one of the things that he was asked was, would he remain on Labour's ruling National Executive Committee? He's resigning from the Home Affairs Select Committee, but he stays an MP, and he wants to stay on that ruling committee. When he was asked that, he sort of said, well, yes, why wouldn't I? As far as he's concerned, he will remain on that committee. But Jeremy Corbyn, Labour leader, was asked about it today, and he said that it would be discussed next week by the NEC and with Keith Vaz present. So I think if there's any question about Keith Vaz perhaps being pushed out of that role on Labour's ruling body, then he may still have further to fall.
Andy, thank you. The radical preacher Anjem Choudary has been jailed for 5.5 years for inviting support for so-called Islamic State. Choudary has been held responsible for helping to radicalise young men and women, including the killers of soldier Lee Rigby. The judge said he was a dangerous man who had shown contempt for British values of democracy. And as he sentenced him, Chowdhury's supporters shouted Allahu Akbar, Arabic for God is great. Here's Julian Drucker.
Confined now to a prison van or a prison cell, radical preacher Anjem Choudary has been silenced. But over the course of 20 years, the self-styled most hated man in Britain was given free rein to espouse extremist views.
We're here today to ask you to defend your Muslim brothers and sisters.
Police have linked his followers to attacks abroad and in the UK, specifically the murder of Fusilier Lee Rigby. But this former solicitor crossed a legal line in June 2014. His crime? He and his co-defendant invited support for the so-called Islamic State group in a series of talks like this one posted online.
From this narration we can see that it is our obligation to have a Khalifa, and we must fight those who differ.
Both men were preaching hate and extremism across communities, and they were also encouraging others to join terrorist organisations both here and overseas. So the sentence today, I think, is a credit to both counter-terrorism policing and our security service partners.
Jailing the pair, Mr Justice Holroyd told Choudary, "You said nothing to condemn any aspect of what ISIS was doing at the time. In that way, you indirectly encouraged violent terrorist activity." Addressing both defendants, he said, "You are both mature men and intelligent men who knew throughout exactly what you were doing."
As his 5.5-year jail sentence was handed down, Choudary smiled at his co-defendant and at his supporters. As the court cleared, from the public gallery, one of them shouted, "Allahu Akbar, God is great."
But there are fears a new extremist could now fill the vacuum left by Chowdary's imprisonment.
The fact that we let Anjem roam around in the UK for the last 15 to 20 years, unopposed, unchallenged, means that there are many people like him who have this worldview that are part of this global jihadist insurgency. And that's what we need to tackle now.
The prison service has refused to comment on whether Choudary will serve his sentence in solitary confinement. But at 5.5 years, it is half the jail term he could have faced. Julian Drucker, 5 News.
2 15-year-olds have pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of a mother and her daughter whose bodies were found in a house in Lincolnshire. 49-year-old Elizabeth Edwards and her 13-year-old daughter Katie were found dead in Spalding in April. The two accused deny murder and are likely to go on trial next month. A court has been told that a taxi driver accused of murdering a young woman from Swindon led police to her body. Becky Godden went missing in January 2003. Christopher Halliwell, who's already serving life for another murder, is alleged to have told a detective that he killed her and buried her body in a field. He denies murder. And the French woman who underwent the world's first face transplant has died. Isabelle Dinois, who was 49, had been diagnosed with 2 types of cancer. She had the groundbreaking surgery in 2005. Sports Direct has promised to ditch 0-hours contracts and give nearly 20,000 employees a guaranteed number of hours instead. The country's biggest sports retailer has launched a major overhaul of its working practices in response to a stinging internal investigation that called its failure to pay some staff the minimum wage unacceptable. Well, one former worker has been telling Charlotte Grant how difficult working there was.
It was a place where you were too scared to open your mouth because you were afraid of losing your hours. Or
Katrina Kelly was 16 when she worked for Sports Direct. She says her 0-hours contract meant zero respect.
You think about it and think the thumbprint scanning in for your shift, 15 minutes docked if you were late by 1 minute, being searched out of the building, not being trusted, not knowing when you were working next, not knowing when you were going home.
There was worse to come. Undercover filming helped expose disturbing treatment of Sports Direct staff, while MPs condemned what they called a culture of fear, the company's warehouse likened to a Victorian workhouse. Now an internal report agrees there were serious shortcomings at the Sports Direct warehouse, which the retailer said it deeply regrets. Today, Sports Direct promised to stop the controversial 6 strikes policy, a punishment for staff, for example, for taking too long on a toilet break. Sports Direct also pledged to offer retail staff guaranteed hours rather than 0-hour contracts and said it will ensure all warehouse staff are paid above the national minimum wage. This is the brand's billionaire founder. When he was questioned by MPs, Mike Ashley admitted the company made mistakes.
Do you accept that the company was effectively paying workers below the minimum wage?
On that specific point, for that specific bit of time, yes.
The report says Mike Ashley takes ultimate responsibility, but the MP who asked questions then believes the report doesn't go far enough.
If you work in the warehouse in Shirebrook, you won't get this offer of a permanent contract, and some of the worst examples of working practices were found in the warehouse in Shirebrook. So that's why, although some good steps have been made, it's not all praiseworthy by any stretch of the imagination.
If the Sports Direct brand's been damaged, its customers don't seem to mind.
I don't see it causing me any negative towards the company, so I would still come here.
I just came in here because it's the cheapest place I know to get sports stuff.
So it's not put you off at all, the bad reports?
I just can't afford anywhere else, to be honest.
The company's shares are now up 6%. Welcome news for the boss, Mike Ashley, who faces shareholders at the company's AGM tomorrow. The company's attitude to prices won't change, but many hope the attitude towards its staff will mean they now get a better deal. Charlotte Grant, 5 News.
And still to come on the programme. Caught on camera. Have government plans for new grammar schools been leaked? The protest that brought an airport to a standstill.
I had cucumber sandwiches, yoghurt or a bit of fruit with mine.
And cutting down on the crisps, the new campaign to make children's packed lunches more healthy. All that and more after the break. Hello and welcome back. You're watching 5 News. Are grammar schools the best way to educate our children? It's a debate that's been had right across England recently, and it's clearly one that's been had in Downing Street too, because eagle-eyed photographers have managed to take pictures of a top-secret document being carried by a minister. Let's talk to Catherine Jones, who's here. Tell us more, Catherine.
Well, not for the first time a minister has forgotten all those cameras ranged outside Downing Street and has gone in clutching a confidential memo. In this case, it appears it was the leader, a deputy leader of the Lords, Lord Howe, and the memo he's holding is from the most senior civil servant in the Education Department. Here is the first line of that paragraph that's visible. The condoc, that means consultation document, says we will open new grammars, albeit that they would have to follow various conditions. And the rest of the paragraph seems to imply that the Education Secretary, Justine Greening, does have concerns about this and would only like to see this as an option once existing grammars had expanded and proved that they were not harming the prospects of kids that don't get in.
So what insight does it give us to policy then?
Well, I think what it really shows us is just how high up Theresa May's agenda this decision about grammars is. And I think that's interesting because it's a really big decision. It's the kind of thing that would define her premiership. And if we were ever to talk about Mayism like Thatcherism, it's the kind of thing that would shape that. She, of course, hasn't been able to be drawn on her thoughts. In fact, the memo writer says, I simply do not know what the Prime Minister thinks of this. The Education Department has issued a statement merely saying they think it's inappropriate to comment on internal documents.
Catherine, thank you. A group of activists have been arrested for breaking into London's City Airport and staging a sit-in on the runway. The protesters from Black Lives Matter are believed to have gained access by rowing across the Thames in a dinghy. They said they did it to highlight how black people are more likely to be exposed to air pollution. Simon Vigar reports.
Surrounded by police and airport staff, in the centre of the picture here you can see one of the protesters sitting high above the others, chained to a tripod they've erected on the runway. London City Airport operates in the old Royal Docks, the runway surrounded by water. It's believed the protesters from the direct action group Black Lives Matter used a small boat to get their equipment across. And of course, it meant all flights in and out were cancelled.
Absolutely horrendous. Been here since about 7:30 this morning. There's protesters on the runway. And they should just remove them, to be honest. I've got no sympathy, I'm sorry, but I've got no sympathy with these guys.
Fortunately, these were just a bunch of fools, but anybody with any real intent to harm could have done the same thing, and the results could have been much more devastating. So yeah, we're all very upset.
The organisation, it is important, but I mean, you know, going extreme, to my opinion, I think is not something that should be acceptable.
Black Lives Matter was launched in the United States to protest against police shootings. 1 month ago, there were sit-ins here to mark the 5th anniversary of the death of Mark Duggan. His shooting prompted riots in Tottenham, which then spread. But today's protest was against airport expansion and climate change, so it's got a little bit confusing.
When we're faced with aviation expansion, we're seeing that politicians aren't serious about climate change, and the climate crisis is disproportionately affecting people of colour, black people across the globe.
Well, it's now approaching 1 o'clock, so it's taken all morning for this busy little airport to get back to operations. The question is now, what can they do to improve security? It has to be the top priority, because next time it may not be a small band of climate change activists. Simon Viger, 5 News.
Well, they weren't the only ones facing disruption at airports today. Thousands of British Airways passengers around the world endured long delays after an IT problem hit check-in desks. One passenger claims she was given a written boarding pass. BA has apologised and said the problem is now fixed. Prince Harry has made a personal donation to help Brazilian children attend the Paralympics. The Prince has given money to a campaign that's hoping to allow 10,000 youngsters to watch the Rio Games live. Kensington Palace says he'll also be closely following the fortunes of competitors from his Invictus Games that he helped set up. The Paralympics opening ceremony takes place tomorrow. And Andy Murray has stormed through to the quarterfinals of the US Open, beating Bulgarian Grigor Dimitrov in straight sets. The Wimbledon champion dropped only 5 games in the entire match, and he even broke his fastest ever serve, sending down an ace at 141 miles an hour. Now, what did you have in your school-packed lunch? A sandwich, a drink, an apple perhaps? Well, these days, it seems the vast majority of kids' lunches aren't quite so healthy. A study on English primary schools has revealed only 1.6% of pupils, that's 1 child in every 2 classes, has a lunch that meets nutritional standards. Minnie Stevenson has been inspecting lunchboxes at a school in North London.
It's lunchtime at one primary school, and coming back from the summer holidays is hungry work. But what can be found inside those lunchboxes?
Pasta and fruits. I had cucumber sandwiches, yoghurt or a bit of fruit with mine.
While these kids at Duncan Primary School in North London have healthy options on the menu, they are very much in the minority. A major study has found that 98% of packed lunches in England did not meet basic nutritional standards. Instead, they were full of high levels of sugars, salts and saturated fat. In fact, researchers discovered that 60% of lunchboxes contained crisps, 52% had a chocolate bar or a cake, and 46% contained a sugary drink. Nutritionists say switching to healthier options doesn't have to cost you time or more money.
Yeah, so for example, instead of ham sandwiches, which tend to be salty, have hummus sandwiches for the kids, which tend to be healthier. Or for example, instead of crisps, have popcorn, lightly salted or unsalted popcorn. And instead of sugary drinks, have a squash or water, even better.
Let's have some more kids. Who's going to help me cut this up?
Despite high-profile campaigns by the likes of Jamie Oliver, which have improved school dinners, it seems packed lunches are still lagging behind. So how will that go down with parents at the school gates?
I find it upsetting. I find it very, very upsetting because the packed lunches is not that good. Crepes, biscuits, you know, and sandwiches, so it's not healthy.
They need to learn what is healthy for their own kids.
I know my two would definitely do that. They would leave the sandwich and want like the rubbish.
While many schools have their own healthy packed lunch policy, the experts are now calling upon the government to do more and keep junk food out of the nation's lunchboxes. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
Now, before we go, Danny's joined us to tell us what's coming up on 5 News tonight. Hello there, Danny.
Hi, Sham, and we're going to have more on the news of the extremist preacher Anjem Choudary, of course, jailed for 5.5 years, including reaction from the Home Secretary. Plus, just how damaging is Chowdhury's legacy, and could social media companies have done more to limit his ability to spread his messages of hate? So we'll be speaking to a counter-extremism expert about that. Plus, what would you do if this happened?
Oh, my arm! Okay, look, put pressure on it, mate.
And we're going to be speaking to the British Red Cross about why half of us don't know how to treat common but potentially fatal injuries. It really could save your life, Sean.
Yes, thank you. That'll be interesting stuff. Thanks, Danny. That is it for now. Sian Welby has the weather next. I will see you again tomorrow, back at 5. Danny, of course, is back in an hour. Thanks for watching tonight. Goodbye for now.